Why F1 can never have a greatest of all time. This is probably the juiciest conversation topic you can possibly have, not only in Formula 1, but probably across all sports. The greatest of all time, the GOAT. Or as lots of people use on social media, just a GOAT emoji. Now, some people joke about a particular driver being the GOAT, Nicholas Latifi, for example. I also know that others are blinded by their fandom of a particular driver to claim they are in fact the best driver who has ever graced the sport. But I'm here to basically say that everyone is firstly allowed their own opinion, and no opinion is wrong. And secondly, there can never officially be a fair greatest of all time label. Even if I want to shout from the hilltops that it's Michael Schumacher, please refer to my previous point about people being blinded by their fandom. Now, there have been many great drivers in F1. It's not surprising, really, considering it's been around for 72 years. I am not denying this at all, and perhaps you can officially crown a certain driver to be the greatest of an era, but no, you cannot give a greatest of all time. There are many reasons for this, one of them being that F1 as a sport is completely unique. Unlike others, F1's competitive landscape can completely change over the course of a single decade. Regulations change, technology advances, and teams literally bend the laws of physics to give their drivers the best car possible. And this presents the F1 GOAT debate's biggest flaw. An F1 World Championship isn't necessarily won by the most talented driver. It's decided by who has the best combination of machinery and human. However, on this, I don't personally like how a lot of fans completely disregard a driver's achievements purely because they have the fastest car. Lewis Hamilton, for example, has the most insane record of always winning a race in every single season he has competed in. As of recording right now, 2022 may well be the year to unfortunately break this streak. He's not always had the best car. 2009 is a great example of McLaren having a pretty woeful bit of kit, but Lewis still managing 2 wins. Or how about 2013 when Hamilton moved to Mercedes, where they probably had the 3rd best car, but he still snatched a victory in Hungary that year. These are the kind of results and statistics which can make a driver one of the best. But how do you label Lewis, for example, as the greatest ever? That 2013 season I mentioned, Nico Rosberg won 2 races in the same team. That doesn't make him the GOAT, does it? There's just too many variables. The driver can make the difference in those make or break situations, but there's only so much they can achieve if the car isn't there. Hamilton hasn't gone from one of the greatest drivers F1 has ever seen to a midfield runner this year, or another example being that nobody would have won the World Championship in last year's Haas. For all we know, Nikita Mazepin may have been the greatest driver of... Who am I kidding? We all know he wasn't. Max Verstappen even said in 2021 that most of the drivers on the grid are capable of winning world championships, but they just don't have the car to do it. Another thing that I feel is completely overlooked by a lot of fans and also very hard to be measured, unless you're inside the team, is the driver's role in actually developing a car and helping them move up the grid. A team doesn't simply make a car and then any average Joe can go out and win races in it. It takes a huge amount of time to understand the beast that they created, and then it's the driver's job to feed back what is needed to continue striving forward. These cars aren't autopilot, as much as some people think. Now, I mentioned briefly about technology advancing in the world of Formula 1, and that in itself completely destroys any chance of there being a GOAT of Formula 1. Since there is such a massive divide between where F1 started to where it is now, it's impossible to compare drivers across eras like you can in other sports. Let's take Juan Manuel Fangio, for example. Between 1952 and 1957, he won 5 F1 World Championships with 3 different constructors. Not only was his car vastly slower and less advanced than the rocket ships we have today, but he also smoked, didn't wear a seatbelt, and didn't even have a driver's license. So how on earth would you start comparing him to the likes of Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton? And it's the same problem the other way around. Today's drivers have access to a wide variety of sports science-fueled training regimes that are designed to turn them into some of the most physically impressive athletes in the world. On the other hand, James Hunt would show up to a Grand Prix whilst nursing a hangover. Let's now fast forward all the way to the 80s and 90s. In this era, the cars were much more advanced and are a closer comparison to what we have today. But still, there are far too many variables to even think about comparing the likes of Senna and Prost to anyone on today's grid. In this particular era, cars still ran with manual gearboxes, they were less reliable, and they had little regard for driver safety, which must have been a psychological battle in itself to overcome for a lot of the drivers. The F1 GOAT debate will continue on for as long as Formula 1 is around, and probably after as well. It will never be stopped. This isn't what this video is trying to do. It's to highlight that if somebody tells you you're wrong for thinking a certain driver is the best of all time, tell them to kindly jog on and refer them to this video. You cannot be wrong when it comes to debating this. Well, unless you're picking a driver like Al Pease, who got disqualified back in the 70s for driving too slowly in a race. It's just a big old game of what if, and we all like to play it in all walks of life. What if Hamilton never went to Mercedes? What if Senna drove in 2021? How many titles would Schumacher win if he was racing in 1952? These are questions that cannot be answered apart from within our own imagination. There you have it, why there can never be a greatest of all time in Formula 1. What do you think to this debate? Have you crowned a GOAT in your head? Let us know in the comment section below.